Hey, hi, hello! This video is the video that takes a beautiful wrap up at the end of the month and combines it with my wonderful TBR game and balances whether or not I read enough books in order to buy all of the books that I read this month. So March was a really funky month. I went through a reading slump. I acknowledged that I was going through a reading slump, and I got out of a reading slump all in 1 month, and it was kind of great and beautiful, and I still think I'm struggling a little bit, to be honest, but I am headed out of it. This pile back here is all of the physical books that I read this month. Well, that's kind of a lie. I listened to a few of these on audio. I read a lot more books than those. So this pile next to me is all the books I bought this month. Balanced? Stay tuned to the end to find out. Okay, so actually starting out in the month of February, I did read one book at the very end of the month. It was the last day of the month, but I was planning on using it for my March TBR game. And if you don't know about my March TBR game, I play bingo every single month, and if I get a bingo, I'm allowed to buy a book to pay for that. And so I have to read 5 books to get a bingo, and there are prompts so that I can do that. I read a book the last day of February, but knew I was counting it towards March, so I don't have any bad feelings about reading it in February, but I'm going to talk to you about it now. And then everything else on this list I read in the month of March. So to start off the list, I read Burn Our Bodies Down by Rory Power, which was for the prompt book I most wanted to read this month, which is kind of disappointing because I rated it 2 stars. I really did not like this one. I think it was a good idea. I just think that it wasn't enough of anything for it to be executed well. I went into it expecting some kind of like weird, twisty, YA weird contemporary twisty horror thriller book. I was expecting it to be some kind of mix of Wilder Girls with something from Katrina Leno, like You Must Not Miss or Horrid. I wanted those kind of weird, creepy vibes from both of them, but also maybe some magical realism kind of going on. So this is the story of a girl who is not in touch with her family outside of her own mother, and her mother look eerily similar. And then one day she manages to get in touch with her grandma, and she goes off to live with her and basically find these answers to her childhood. I just felt like this book wasn't actually enough of any one thing. It wasn't a YA contemporary. It wasn't a weird paranormal book. It wasn't quite a thriller, but it had aspects of all of those different things, but its execution just wasn't great. And then pair that with it's kind of a really slow and boring book. Like not much is said or done throughout the whole entire story to keep you interested. There's kind of this one big mystery and that's it. And you don't find out the answer to that until the very end, which is how mysteries work. But I often like when mysteries have like other little things pulling you in throughout the story, some twists and turns and whatnot. I'd love to say I think this book could be for the right kind of person, but from everything I've been seeing online about it, I really think that pretty much everyone is disliking this book, especially if you're going into it expecting the masterpiece that Wilder Girls is. The twist at the end was kind of a letdown too. I just felt like it wasn't big enough of a reveal, and I felt like it was kind of predictable, and I just wanted more from this book. Next, I read Sometimes I Lie, and I read this for the prompt gray cover, and I will be talking about this really in depth in a video coming up in the month of April, but to quickly go into it, this is a book about a woman who is in a coma, and she tells you 3 things right from the beginning. She tells you what her name is, she tells you something else, I can't remember right now, and then she tells you, and sometimes I lie. And so it's an unreliable narrator telling you kind of, you're flashing back in the past to when she was a child, and you're flashing back in the past to when she was an adult, like a few months before the coma, and then you're also getting her time period of when she was in the coma. It was actually really well done. I really like the idea of this unreliable narrator. I think there were a few aspects that could have made the book better, but I go really in depth in this in my April video, so I'm not going to do it here, and I ended up rating the book 3.5 stars. I would recommend it to certain people. I don't know who, but someone out there would probably enjoy this book a lot. Next, I read the book Blacktop Wasteland, which was another interesting book. This will also be part of that same video that's coming out in April, and I'm excited to bring that one to you. This is the story of a Black man who has escaped his criminal life as a getaway driver, and now some financial burdens are coming to him and his family, and he's having to re-enter that life and try to decide whether or not it's worth it to get back into being a getaway driver for criminals, people who are robbing stores, or if he can make money a different way. And I actually ended up really liking it. The beginning was kind of odd and the end was kind of odd, but the middle part was like really good, really, really good. And I go also very in depth in that video, which will be coming out shortly, into that book. So I will wait until then. I rated it 3.5 out of 5 stars though. Next, we're gonna bundle some books up here really quickly so we can kind of get through these. So I did a Bardugo-a-thon this month, and these are the 4 books so far that I have read in honor of Rule of Wolves coming out in a few days. By the time this video is out, it's out. But for me right now, it doesn't come out yet. It comes out tomorrow. All of these are rereads, by the way. So I read Shadow and Bone, which I rated 4 out of 5 stars. I read Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom, which I rated both 5 out of 5 stars. And then I reread King of Scars, which I rated 4.75 out of 5 stars. I really love these whole entire Grishaverse books. I mean, I knew that going in. I knew I was going to enjoy them. I was excited about it. So Shadow and Bone, we're following Alina Starkov as she realizes that she is this powerful Grisha called the Sun Summoner, and she's taken away to this palace where she can develop and learn and train her gift so that she can destroy the Shadow Fold. In Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom, we are following this band of 6 people as they are performing this miraculous heist in this ice palace. And in this one, we're following the actual heist, and in this one, we're following the repercussions of that heist. And they are both great books with great found family, absolutely lovely characters. In Six of Crows, we are following some of the characters after the Grishaverse trilogy, Shadow and Bone, and after the Six of Crows duology, as they are trying to basically piece their lives back together after the destruction that has fallen the world at the end of both of those other series. So in this one, we are following Nikolai, Zoya, and Nina, and I do believe that going into the next one, Rule of Wolves, we might still be following the same characters. I'm pretty sure. Like, I don't know why she would throw in someone else at the last minute. And then halfway through the book, you do start following this soldier named Isaac. And I don't want to say anything else because anything else I go into with this book will spoil both of the other series. You really, like, you don't need to read Shadow and Bone to read Six of Crows, but you need to read both Shadow and Bone, Ruin and Rising, Siege and Storm, Six of Crows, and Crooked Kingdom to read King of Scars. Like, otherwise this will spoil a lot of stuff for you. I love them. They're favorites of mine. I've read them all before I knew I was going to enjoy it. I will be having a whole entire Bardugo video coming out in April as well. The theme of this video is I will talk more about it in April. Next, I read Defy the Stars by Claudia Gray, and I read this for the title No O in the title. Oh, I didn't tell you what I read all of those for. You know what? Go watch my my TBR video if you really want to know. You don't remember because I left all of them for what they actually are. So I read Defy the Stars, and this is the story of a girl who, her planet is at war with Earth, and Earth is now run by humans, but they have like these android, it's not the right word, robots that go and fight their wars for them. So it's this girl who is like very religious fighting against these robots from Earth, okay? So she teams up with this robot who can help her destroy Problem, and they work together to try and get her planet an advantage in the war. And it was pitched to me, this romance between this girl and this AI, but it was not that. And it was not good. Honestly, like, it has such good reviews. It had such good reviews online. I was expecting so much more from it. And maybe if I'd gone into it not expecting so much, I would have liked it better, but I never would have liked the book. It just wouldn't have ever been the perfect thing for me. The writing felt really cheesy to me, to be honest. I know that this book was written past 2010. I think it was like 2015 or something that this book was written, but it felt like it was written in the early 2000s. I can't even fully explain it. I couldn't connect with our characters. I couldn't connect with the plot. The coolest thing was we got to experience a few different planets because it is a YA sci-fi, so it's lots of space and space travel and stuff like that. I liked learning about these different planets, and I really liked the world building in this story. I thought it was done really, really well, but I thought the romance was cheesy and forced, and I didn't actually believe any of it. And I thought that the twist at the end wasn't twisty at all. Nothing in the book made me want to continue on with the next one, and the entire time I was ready to put it down and never return to it again. It was one of those books that if someone had taken it away from me while I was reading it and said, oh, you can't finish this, I would have been like, okay, cool, doesn't bother me. So I ended up rating that book 2 stars, and I was disappointed in that. If you love this book, let me know down below why you loved it, and if you haven't read it recently, I recommend rereading it and trying to look me in the eyes and saying that you actually still love it, because it might just be me, but it might be all of us. We might have nostalgia goggles for this book. Next, I read The Lies of Lockemora by Scott Lynch, which was a book for my book club, which is the category that it filled in my TBR bingo. And this was a book that I had previously DNF'd, but I wanted to give it a second shot. And I actually have filmed an entire video of me reading this book, the experience of me reading it for the second time. And it will one day come out. I just don't know when. So I will talk about it as in depth as I can right now, but do know that there might be another time on my channel where I talk about that book even more. I think this book should have stayed buried. I think that I shouldn't have given it a second shot. I think there are 2 types of DNFs. There are the DNFs where you DNF them, you never want to see them again. And then there's the type of DNF where it's like, I wasn't in the mood for it right now. And this book was kind of on the line for me when I originally read it, and so I put it kind of in the category of this book wasn't for me right now, but really I should have put it into the other category because I have so many issues with this book. First off, sexist. You guys want to talk about some sexist fantasy? Why is no one talking about this one? There were 0 women. There was 1 woman and she died like pretty early on into the story. And then there was this woman that was supposed to be greater than all other women who wasn't even in the book the entire time. And oh, you're going to tell me that this was a heist book, but the main heist doesn't actually happen and isn't actually like part of the storyline. The main storyline is actually this like thieving guild is getting taken over by this ghost man. What? I'm spoiling a lot of things about this book. I'm not spoiling like the ending or anything like super important right now. Like all of this happens before the 30% mark, but like, what? I am at a loss for why people absolutely love this book. I see that it is like fantasy, but it was even written weird. Like the author used very complex words to say very simple sentences. There's this one, and I keep quoting it to my book club because I cannot get over the fact that the author thought this was a good enough idea to write. He was trying to say that a certain character was chewing an apple, but he said the certain character was masticating his apple, which like, yeah, masticating means chewed. It means chewed. It does. You can use that word, but why would you? Why would you use that word when we have the word chewed? And it's not like you used the word chewed previously and you were like, oh, I've been using the word chewed a lot recently and I need to like mix it up, otherwise the audience is gonna get bored. No, he just came out of the blue nowhere and was like, masticate, that's the one. And let me tell you, a few paragraphs later, that character masticated his apple again, and I was like, what? And this isn't the only time that he used it. There was a few instances where he used big ass words to explain small ass concepts, and I don't get it. I ended up DNFing the book at 50% and then going online and reading a summary of the last 50%, and I'm counting it as read. I understand there are people out there who will not agree with me on this and who will say you didn't actually read the book, but I can talk to you about the ending. I can spoil the shit out of that ending. I know exactly what happens. I know where we left off, and I know where book 2 is going to pick up. So I've read the entire book. I'm counting it, and I rated it 2 stars. Next, I read, oh my goodness. Oh, my books are sliding. I should put these back real quick. Next, I read The Memory of Babel by, who is this by? Christelle Davos. And this is the third book in the Winter Promise series. Recently, I read A Winter's Promise and The Missing Claire de Lune, which are the first two books. The fourth one is getting translated to English right now, and it'll be out in September. So I'm really excited because I rated book 1 5 stars, I rated book 2 5 stars, and I rated book 3 4 stars. Book 3 was not bad. It wasn't a bad book at all by any means. I enjoyed myself. I enjoyed reading it. I would reread all of these series. I'm really loving all of them. But this one just didn't have quite the same feel as the first two. It didn't get quite to 5-star vibes. And I think my biggest issue with that is we're following this like cast of characters and this family, found family, all in the same kind. There's like both together. And in this book, for certain reasons, certain characters are not present, and we're following our main girl, Ophelia, some more as she's exploring Babel, and she's learning about this other arc. I should probably explain what these books are about. So in A Winter's Promise, we're following our main girl, Ophelia, as she is married off to this other arc. And arcs are these floating cities in this futuristic world, and everyone has to live in an arc. The earth is completely non-flourishing anymore. And people on each arc are descendant of a different god. So in her descendants, she is from Artemis, and she gets married off to this arc. I can't say who his leader is, but she gets married off to this other arc where the powers are a lot more cruel, because if you are a descendant of the gods, you have certain powers. And Ophelia has the ability to touch objects and read them, and she has the ability to travel through mirrors. That's all kind of book 1, and she's in this arranged marriage and she's trying to figure things out. So here she travels to the Ark of Babel, and without spoiling anything, you kind of learn a lot more about this other arc and how it differs from some of the other ones we've previously seen. Now, the issue with that is she has lost touch, because she's all by herself on this other arc, with all of the other characters that we've come to know and love in our first two books. So our author has to kind of struggle to, I should keep holding this up, she kind of has to struggle to kind of make us connected to these new characters, but they're not quite as good as our old characters, but also like they're perfectly fine, and the plot is good, but like it just wasn't quite the same. I am excited to read book 4. It has horrible reviews online, so I'm also very nervous to read book 4, but I will be picking it up ASAP and reading it, and I'm really excited. And I do recommend this series. This was a good book still, even with the small complaints that I have, which aren't even that great. The ending of this book, like literally the last chapter of this book, was phenomenal. The last chapter was 5 stars, but the rest of the book was 4, so I can't like rate it up because of just that one little thing. Next, I read Master of Sorrows by Justin Call, and this book is so shiny. I can see it like reflecting in my camera. So this is a big book. This is a big boy, but I really enjoyed this story. So this is kind of a magical school setting, kind of not book, where we are following our main character, Anev, as he is trying to be trained to become an avatar. And an avatar is someone in this land who is sent off to find these magical artifacts, because magic is outlawed and magic is considered bad and kind of like a sin in this world. And so he's at this mysterious unknown school where you learn a lot about it, but in the beginning you don't totally know a ton about it, of course. And he is an acolyte, I believe is the word, and he's being trained to pass this test. So if he passes the test by a certain time, he can become an avatar, and basically the last test for him is coming up, and so he needs to pass it. And we know pretty early on that Anev is hiding a big secret, and let me see if the back says it. The back doesn't say it, so I'm not going to say anything more about the big secret. But I really enjoyed this book. I really liked the characters. I liked the twists and turns. I thought the world building was really good. I think my biggest issue with it was there were some slow pockets. So there were some periods of like high action and really interesting things, especially the competitions. There's 2 competitions and there's like a mission that happens in the book, and all 3 of those are really good. And then there's even this last battle at the end, and I'm not a huge fan of battles, but I do think that this one was well written. But in between all of those high action scenes, there was about 50 to 100 pages of world building and learning about the plot and learning about this world and why things are the way they are. And those things were all really, really important, especially because this is going to be a 4-book series. So I think a lot of this book was setting up for some of the next books. And I didn't dislike the book. I ended up rating it 4 out of 5 stars. It was really enjoyable. I really liked it. I would read the sequel. The sequel is like even longer than this one is. I think this one is like 7 This one's like 600 pages and the sequel is 994 pages. So I'm really kind of nervous about that. But I would pick up the sequel. I would read it. I enjoyed this. I feel a connection to some of the characters, not so much our main character. I feel like he still has a lot of growth to go through and that he had some really good moments where he like outthought the system and he thought about things in a different way than you were necessarily thinking he would think of them, which was really awesome. But I also felt like there were some times where he could be too arrogant and too full of himself for my taste. But I think that he is very young in this book and he's going to be doing a lot of growing in the next few books. So I'm excited. I think book 2 is going to be a journey book. I'm not totally sure about that, but I think it will be. So yeah, I think book 2 comes out later this year, to be completely honest, maybe like August or something, sometime in the fall, we'll say. I recommend picking this up if you're a fan of adult fantasy that kind of, you don't necessarily want like sex and a ton of blood and gore, because this was pretty mild for a lot of fantasies that I've read, but it still had adult themes and adult settings. I think teenagers could read this book and also still really enjoy it, but it doesn't have that same like vibe that YA books have, if you know what I mean. Oh, look. That's its new spot. So next I read The Invasion of the Tearling, and right before the end of the month I picked up The Fate of the Tearling as well. So let's talk about these slightly separately. So The Invasion of the Tearling picks up where the end of The Queen of the Tearling leaves off. So we have Kelsey in her kingdom. Let me back up a little bit. Book 1, we're following Kelsey. She's a 19-year-old girl who is supposed to be the next queen of the land, and it is her 19th birthday, and she's been in isolation and she's being sent off to rule her kingdom. And the book is mostly about her getting to her kingdom and realizing that things are horrible and it is not how a kingdom is supposed to be run. And it is about her learning how to take control, learning how to be a queen, learning that cruelty isn't necessarily a bad thing. And The Invasion of the Tearling picks up right after that, except this time now, she's been in her queenhood for a little bit, but there is an enemy right on their border, and it is the Red Queen. She is a vile enemy and she is full of magic, immortal being, and we're kind of nervous for our main character. The Fate of the Tearling picks up right at the end of The Invasion of the Tearling, where Kelsey, for certain reasons, has been separated from everyone that she knows, is no longer in her kingdom, and is trying to make things work. And that's all I'm going to really say. I could go more in depth with both of those plots, but I don't want to spoil anything for people who haven't read them. So I rated the first book, which I did not read this month, 5 stars. I rated the second book, which I did read this month, 5 stars. And then I rated the third book, which I also read this month, 5 stars. I don't remember the last time I read a series and rated all books 5 stars. It was so good. And if you haven't watched the vlog where I read this book, you should go and watch it right now, because I actually sob on camera when I finish it. Not because like, oh, I'm done with it, because the ending was the saddest ending I've ever read in a book. The saddest ending I've ever read in a book. It was a huge twist. And if you go online, a lot of people hated the ending. They absolutely hated it, and I can understand why, but it worked out perfectly for me and I loved it, and I think it was great. I think it was honestly great. I loved it. I highly recommend this series. It is an adult fantasy series. It is gory. There is some sex. It's not so much on-page sex, I don't think, ever. But actually, you know what? Book 3, there was some on-page sex, but there's language, there's gore, there's definitely references to sex and prostitution and stuff like that. So just be aware of that. This book I read for the category of sequel, and this book I read for the category of character same as me, because our main girl is a girl, and so am I. I didn't mention, but I read The Memory of Babel for Title Contains a T. Next, I reread Gemina, which is an old favorite series of mine. I've read Illuminae files a few different times now. I am rereading this with some friends and it's really enjoyable. So next month we're going to be getting to Obsidio. So Gemina is the sequel to Illuminae, where we are following this mining disaster which has left this large group of people in the spaceship trying to escape this other ship that attacked their colony and is now trying to come and destroy them before they can get to the people who can know about what they've done. And in Illuminae we follow 2 characters from the mining colony, and in Gemina we follow 2 characters from the wormhole spaceport. So the ship is trying to get to that point. And it's a really good series. It's multimedia. The book is super funky. The audiobook is how I've been listening to all of them, and the audiobook is so good. It's one of the best audiobooks of all time. I highly recommend it. It is very enjoyable to listen to. This book I really like this book. I mean, I love the whole entire series. I think of the books as one of my favorite series of all times, but this one just isn't quite the same for me as book 1. I prefer book 1 and I prefer book 3 to this one, which I have both of them up here somewhere. I don't know where book 1 is. Oh, it's where you can't see it. So yeah, I like this book. I ended up rating it 4 stars upon reread. I think the first time I read it, I rated it 3.5, and then the second time I rated it 4 stars, and this is the third time that I also rated it 4 stars. It's good. It's enjoyable. I really like Hannah, who, I think that's how you say her name, is our main girl. I think Nick, you could take him or leave him. He's fine as is, but there are some other really interesting characters. There's some really cool twists and turns. There's some great AI representation. Aiden, my boy, but it's a good book. I recommend reading it. I'm gonna put it down now. And Gemina was a buddy read, so that is the prompt that it counted for. Next, I picked up The Ones We're Meant to Find, which was an arc that was sent to me, and I was supposed to read this for my April TBR, but I read it the last few days of March, so I'm not sure where that's gonna fall because I DNF'd it. If I hadn't DNF'd it, I think I would have counted it for April, just because that's originally what I had planned on doing, but since it's a DNF, I'm really kind of on the fence about what I should do for it. I think honestly, since it's a DNF, I'm just gonna kind of erase it, talk about it in this video, and then it's not gonna count for either of my bingos. So The Ones We're Meant to Find is like a futuristic sci-fi, YA sci-fi story, and we're following 2 different perspectives, 2 sisters, and one sister is stuck on this island. She's been there for about 3 years, and she wants to get off so she can return to her sister. And then the other perspective is the other sister, and she is stuck in this futuristic green city, and she does not feel at home. She's also lost and trapped. And I think it's a really good concept, but what lost me is that I felt like I was learning so much about these 2 sisters in their separate worlds, and about the world that we are in as a whole, and about their different personalities, and I felt lost and confused through the entire story, and I'm just now realizing that might have been the author's intent, since both of the girls were lost and confused through the book, that she was writing in such a way that I, the reader, would understand their feelings of lost and confused. Whoa. If that was her goal, then she did a really good job with it. But I wasn't enjoying myself reading it, so I am trying to make an effort this year that if I'm not enjoying a book, I'm okay with putting it down. And after reading about 25% of this book, I flipped to the end, which is the worst thing you can do, and I read the last like 10-ish chapters. So let's say I read 10% at the end, and I did not like the ending. I thought it was a really dumb ending. I thought it was really bad. I thought it was weird, but not in a good way, because I like weird endings, but this one was just not for me. And so I was like, you know what? I don't think that's worth it, and I'm going to DNF the book. Since it was an arc, I do like to rate my arcs, even if I don't DNF them. I don't rate them on Goodreads, but just kind of for me and for the publisher so they can know. So I did say that I would have rated this book 2 out of 5 stars if I had been given the option. So just so you know, yeah, if you go on my Goodreads, I don't think it has the rating. I don't know, maybe it does. Okay, I have 2 final books to talk about with you all before we figure out whether or not I owe this month for buying so many books. So the last 2 books I'm going to talk about in tandem, and that is Heir of Fire and Queen of Shadow. I am currently still reading Queen of Shadow, so I will not be giving a final rating in this video, so knock it out of here. But I will say that the first time I read it, I rated it 5 out of 5 stars, and that if you want to know what I ended up rating it the second time, which is right now, just go to my next coming Monday's vlog. I'm reading it for that vlog, so if you just wait a few days, hang out, Monday, you'll be able to know what I rated the book the second time. Heir of Fire, on the other hand, the first time I read it, I rated it 4 out of 5 stars, and the second time I read it, I rated it 4.75 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it the second time. I was kind of feeling meh about the series up until now, because when I reread Throne of Glass, the rating went down, like significantly down in my opinion. It went a whole star down, and I just felt like it did not hold up to what I originally remember the series being. And then I reread Crown of Midnight. It kept its rating exactly the same, and I was just like, okay, cool, but I'm ready for something to be like really good, because I remember parts of this series being really, really good. Well, parts of the series being really good is in Heir of Fire. Heir of Fire really is when I think this book series starts. So Throne of Glass is a setup for the series. But Crown of Midnight, the first 50% of it is also a setup for this series. And I think if you look at it that way, like if I look at it that way at least, I'm way more okay with it. I kind of wish she had written Throne of Glass as a prequel and then started the book at Crown of Midnight. I think that would have been a really interesting choice, and I think it would have been a cool choice. I also think that if Sarah J. Maas had already written a few books, she would have been more able to have done something like that. But a lot of times debut authors, because Throne of Glass was her first book if I remember correctly, a lot of times debut authors, they can't be as adventurous or as exciting. Publishers don't want to see that so much from them. They want a no-risk situation. So I get it. But I think it would have been a cool twist. Heir of Fire, we're still following the same stuff. I'm not going to tell you about the plots of either of these books because anything I say will be spoilers for the first two books, but I really enjoyed myself. I'm enjoying myself with Queen of Shadow right now, I will say that, but I'm kind of still waiting for things to happen in it. So yeah, 4.75. The ending was really good. I do have to say it really picked up for me, especially Manon's chapters. Manon and Sorsha are some of my favorite characters in the series, and so both of them are introduced in this book, and it was really good to read their perspectives. But also I really love Lorcan, and he's introduced in this book, but he's introduced from like a distance. So like you look across the field and you're like, there's Lorcan, and then the book continues on and that's all that you get from him, and you get more of him, I'm pretty sure, in Queen of Shadows. I haven't gotten to him yet. So I'm excited because it was like a little Easter egg for me where I'm like, there it is. There's my favorite white boy. I'm excited to continue on now once again with these books. I'm glad that I'm feeling this way. I'm glad that I've been reading them. And I always like feeling happy that I picked up books. So Heir of Fire was for a buddy read. And since Queen of Shadows was going to count for March, I will count it for March's TBR bingo, but I don't have any slots on my board that will get me a bingo, so it doesn't really matter what prompt it fills because it can't get me anything anyways. That left me with 3 bingos. I didn't show you. That left me with 3 bingos. So I got one here, I got one diagonal, and I got one across, which is really exciting. Let's look at all the books I bought this month and discuss. I'm gonna hold up this stack one more time for you all because you just heard the words, Amanda got 3 bingos, and you're looking at this stack and you're like, huh, she's gonna have to pay some major books. First thing I'd like to say is I did buy The Invasion of the Tearling after hello there, a sticker just fell out. After I had already read The Invasion of the Tearling because I read it through my library. So that one doesn't count because I only have to use a bingo for books that I haven't previously read. I did buy The Fate of the Tearling before I read The Fate of the Tearling, but since I read it this month, I think it should count as something I don't have to pay for. I think that's totally fair, and I don't think I should have to pay for it, so I'm not going to. So that goes on the stack. Then I bought The Last Namsara for my book club's book next month, and I'm really excited to be getting to that. So this does count for my first bingo, so I now only have 2 remaining. I also picked up The Ocean at the End of the Lane, which I will be talking about in a future video coming up, but I have already previously read it, so it doesn't count for anything. Then I picked up Tales from the Hinterland, which I had already read, so it doesn't count for anything. And then I picked up The Raven Tower, which I had already previously read and loved. This is a favorite of mine, so it doesn't count for anything. So that leaves me with 3 books that I bought at the beginning of the month. Now let's talk about this really quickly. So I, of course, am playing bingo to try to keep myself from buying lots of books and having so many owned but not read books on my shelf. The real goal of this is to get my number down. But I accomplished something in my personal life at the beginning of March that was something I've been trying to do for a little bit now, and I felt like I deserved a reward from doing that. And I decided at the time, before I'd even started this month's bingo, that it would be okay for me to buy 3 books and that they wouldn't count towards bingo. And this is something I decided before I had even done my bingos for the month. So there was like nothing affecting it. I didn't know how much I was going to read. I didn't know if I'd actually be able to cover them or not. I just wanted to pay for them separately. So I picked up Witches of Ash and Ruin, What Big Teeth, and Don't Tell a Soul. And all 3 of these I'm going to say I don't have to get a bingo for. They don't count. They're not affected by that. They are just books that can come onto my shelf without being penalized or without me being penalized for it. So yeah, that means that I only have one book I bought this month, which is like ridiculous when you look at this plus this. I feel like I cheated something here, but I didn't. I mean, these are my rules. I've had them the same since the very beginning, that I could buy books I've previously read and that I can always change the rules for reward system. I have 2 bingos going into the month of April. I'm really pleased with that. So no punishments. I have some points I can carry over to a future month if I slip up ever. Yeah, that's exciting. That's great, because there are a few books I have my eye on that if I read enough in April, you know, if I read 10 books, I'd be okay with buying one. And I'm blabbering. You get the deal, right? I'm excited. Stay tuned to see how all of that goes. I'm ready. I'm ready. I also did some unhauling, but I'm not going to be talking about that in this video or really any videos. I don't like doing unhauls videos. I did some unhauling though off of my shelf, so that is also why some of the numbers have gone down so much. So I am going into the month of April with 29 unread books on my owned not read shelf, and I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled about that. It's finally getting towards a closer number that I am comfortable with. Thank you all for watching. Let me know down below if you've read any of these books. I'd love to talk to you about them. Even the books, you know, that I bought that I haven't read yet, which isn't many of them, or the books that I bought that I have read already. I'd love to talk to you about books in general. Let's talk about books. Open communication is the way to go. So thank you for watching once again. I don't remember how my outro goes, but until next time, I will talk to you in the comments. Bye.